Who is the stranger that you have only seen meet once in your life that you still think about time to time? 1986. A year after graduating from a tiny college on Idaho. I was at Disneyland with a high school buddy. I was totally convinced that I saw a college friend, Adam, in line at Pirates of the Caribbean. I kept waving at him, but he looked at me like I was out of my mind. My high school friend tried to talk me down, saying that Adam clearly had no idea who I was. It's not him. Everyone has a twin. Yada. 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 The line finally snakes around to where I am standing right next to Adam, so I tap him on the shoulder and ask, "Hey, aren't you Adam M?" And he says no. I'm his twin brother Aaron. 34 years later and I still tell that story at parties. I only met Aaron once. In 1986. In line at Pirates. But I do wish him and Adam a very happy birthday on Facebook. An old man I overheard telling his grandkids that if their dad got accepted to the job he was interviewing for in town, they would move there and then they could visit each other all the time. Not a complete stranger but a classmate in my first year at uni. We shared some classes but didn't really spoke to each other beside the casual greetings. One morning she got a call on her cell phone. Came back to the classroom visibly upset to gather her things and left. I never saw her again after that. Still think randomly about it sometimes. 14 years later. I was having a rough day and I thought I'd get an ice cream to cheer myself up. I was standing in the line and this old lady looked at me and asked if I was okay. I said I was fine and just had a rough day. I got up to the front to get my ice cream and she tells the cashier, "I've got this young man. He's had a rough day." She smiles at me and says, "Enjoy your ice cream." I still think of her whenever I have a rough day. I send her my good vibes. Once I was walking to work past a homeless shelter pickup spot. It was a sunny day. Middle of summer. A small lady was standing on the sidewalk wearing rain boots, a yellow raincoat, and wrapped completely in a blue vinyl tarp. As I walked by her, she leaned into me, looked me in the eye and said, "Dot. Fish monster?" I still think about her. Did she think I was a fish monster? Was she concerned that I had seen a fish monster? Perhaps she felt I was unprepared. And her questioning tone was more about if I'd heard about the potential of fish monsters. Asterisk. Such a surreally complex interaction in just 2 words. One thing I know for certain is that whatever the fish monster status was, she was clearly the best prepared of everyone present. An old lady who lived next door to me and had a key from the past renter. She walked into my place and made us breakfast thinking I was the same lady who lived there previously. She didn't realize I was a different person. We talked about her grandson joining the police academy and she was worried but proud of him. She died that night. Years ago when I worked at Lowe's, a customer told me in great detail about how he fell through a rotting deck but landed with a joist between his legs and had to go to the dick doctor. When I was in Iraq in 2003, we were partnered with some local police. Their compound was a secure area, and no unauthorized people were allowed in. There was this little girl, probably about 7-9 years old, that sold bananas and was allowed in or out whenever she wanted. I hope she's doing well. I was at the mall as a teenager and a 90-something-year-old Indian woman made deep eye contact and nodded. I got a deep chill and a sense of familiarity, but I was like 14, so I went back to my friends. I once saw my exact double in a Barnes & Noble. We saw each other from a far distance, locked eyes, gave a slow head nod to each other, and kept going without saying a word. Sometimes I wonder how he is doing. Edit. Lol. No. It was not a mirror. He was wearing different clothes. I got robbed at gunpoint and the perpetrators got arrested shortly after. At the sentencing, which was 6-9 months after the robbery, the judge read my victim impact statement, which I had written the day after it happened. I had mentioned something in that statement about being afraid. After the sentencing was over, I was getting ready to leave when a teenage boy came up to me. He asked if he could speak to me. He was the son of the man that robbed me. He told me not to be afraid anymore and apologized for what his dad did. It still brings tears to my eyes when I think about this 10 years later. I hope he knows how much that meant and still means to me. My girlfriend and I were looking for street parking at a local festival. We were 17. I stopped at a stop sign across from the firehouse. A car slammed into me, breaking my tail lights. The middle-aged guy with his daughter got out and started screaming at me, "You little turd." Then opened my door and dragged me out. It was broken up pretty quick. The cops came and the guy knew he was properly FK'd. Charged with moving violation, assault and some other stuff. His daughter was the most mortified person I have ever seen. Those firefighters were all out in front of the station enjoying the festival, in full view of everything. Can't get better witnesses. I think about that guy all the time. I was working at a grocery store once as a cashier. A woman comes into line, and the best way I could describe her was light as a feather. As if not a worry in the world would ever faze her. She's got her baby up top in the cart. The baby starts crying. And at that point I'm expecting the standard, "Oh shh. It's okay. Mommy's here. I'm so sorry." She doesn't instantaneously react like most parents do. She just gracefully turns her head, looks at the kid lovingly, and the kid stops crying. She could just show that kid that everything's going to be okay with one trusting look. I had never seen anything that beautiful and sincere happen in my life that I had to stop and just question everything. Whoever that woman was. It just made me think there are some amazing human beings that exist out there and I may never encounter one like that ever again. I was 16 and was having a crappy day. But I had a couple bucks and went to a McDonald's. I was at a table for two but there weren't any other seats left. So this older woman asked if she could sit with me. Found out that at 16 she had run away and a convent took her in exchange for chores until she got married. Then her husband died some years later. They had no kids and she didn't have any family left. So she went back and struck the same deal. I'm in my 30s now and it still amazes me how peaceful she was when I remember her. When I was 10 I went to a supermarket in my taekwondo uniform. A black man asked me to teach him how to properly kick in the middle of the store in front of everyone. Never seen him since. I met a man at a Wendy's at like 9:55 at night while I was working at Books A Million. I was 19 years old, starving, and had 30 minutes to get in, scarf down a small burger, and get back. The man came out, introduced himself as Mr. Lemonade, and informed me that he was off his meds. Then he left. Wherever Mr. Lemonade is now, I hope he's well and back on his meds. When I was a kid I went with my family on vacation to Veracruz in Mexico. I was in a Trader Joe's and I saw this frail looking man looking at this really buff dude in awe. I don't know why but I wanted to see what would happen to this guy and so I watched. He went up to the big guy, tapped him on the shoulder, and said one day I'm gonna be like you and started doing push-ups right there. I had to leave with my parents but he had gotten like 30 push-ups without stopping. I hope he's buff now. The pretty, cute girl that served me in Starbucks one time. I'm pretty sure she was flirting with me, and is the only person who has ever done so. I went in just before they closed, so I was the only person there at the time. She made a comment about the band on my shirt. We then had a short conversation joking about music, and, at the time, current local events. All seemed tame, and like she was just being nice and making conversation. Until she pointed out that she drew a love heart out of steamed milk in my coffee. Unfortunately, I was too awkward and stupid to realize the connotations of that comment until I was on the train home. When I was 7 years old or so, I remember riding home from school and waving the peace sign out of the window of my parents' car to all the passing cars. I spread peace to one girl, who instantly gave me the middle finger. I was so hurt. All I wanted to do was spread peace. I still think about that bitch to this day. I took the only seat on a crowded bus. Sat next to an old man who leaned over and asked me, "Do you want to learn some math tricks that math teachers and accountants don't even know?" "You bet I do." I was a little worried it was a scam, but he whipped out a calculator and spent the rest of the bus ride showing me a shortcut on how to multiply 11s by 2-digit numbers. Pretty cool. Edit. About 10 years ago when I was in high school, I saw a homeless person who was probably only a few years older than me. I passed by her without offering anything but came back to give her the remaining chips I had. She replied saying, "These are my favorite. Thank you." I feel bad that I wasn't able to give her a proper meal. There's this girl I saw once at a restaurant in New York City. We didn't even have a conversation. It's just the way she looked at me. I'm usually horrible faces, but I still remember her face so well. It's not a romantic encounter, I think, but there's just something about that moment that I cannot forget. I was a teenager and I accidentally backed into a lady's spotless fancy car at a gas station. I just left a dent. But I was panicked and distraught. I talked to her. Was going to give her my information. Was hyperventilating a bit because this hadn't happened to me before. And she seems to think a minute and said it's about time this car had a dent. She refused to take my information and drove away. I still think about her kindness to my stupid teenage self. The pregnant lady who was absolutely bawling in the lobby of a hotel I was visiting for the afternoon. My mom was at a conference and I was going to meet her. I awkwardly approached the lady, asking her what was wrong. She told me that nothing was wrong. It was just that she had decided to serve as the pregnancy surrogate for her sister. She had just had the realization that the decision to be her sister's surrogate really had been the right one for her. She was happy crying because it was all just too perfect for her in that moment. One night, when I was walking home, a man catcalled me from his car. I ignored him, but then the guy literally got out of the car and began to follow me home. I was so scared, but for some reason I didn't call the police because I didn't want to inconvenience them. I picked up my pace and at some point began running, but the man continued to follow me. About a mile into the chase I heard footsteps getting really close. I turned around to fight the man, but this time there was a frightening looking 18-19-year-old boy. He told me that the man who was following me had told him how he was going to also take me and that the creep was recording me. The boy offered to walk me home to make sure I got back safe. I took him up on his offer and got back safe. So boy, if you're reading this, thank you. I appreciate what you did for me. I'm glad you escaped. But OMG, the police exist to be bothered by a crime. I was on a flight to China for a heritage tour over spring break. On the way there, in a check-in line, I was struggling with something. Can't remember what. This really cute Asian guy helped me with it and then carried on. I thought nothing of it. He then ended up being on the same flight with me. 2 weeks later he ended up being on the flight back with us. I didn't realize until we were on the shuttle back to the airport. He recognized me and said a few quick words to me in Mandarin with a smile and then walked off. I, being adopted, do not understand Mandarin. I still don't know what it is he said. I was at a therapist appointment. In the waiting room, and this woman sat down next to me nearly in tears, telling me I look just like her son. I was like 16 at the time, but I've always looked much older because of facial hair. We just talked for a little bit. I say talked, but I mostly listened. I learned her only son was overseas in the military in an active zone. She explained that's why I'm here. Following it with a half-hearted teary-eyed, this young kid has no idea how to respond to this chuckle. I hope her son came home. And I hope she doesn't need therapy anymore. Was living on Nantucket and would go to a bar alone on weekday nights. Got to know the bartender there casually. I sat down one night and me and another guy were the only ones there, so naturally him, myself and the bartender got to all talking. Sat there and joked around with the other gentlemen the night, talked about smoking weed. Sports, bought each other a few beers, asked him toward the end of the night what he did for work. I worked in a liquor store in my early 20s. One day a woman came in and complimented my appearance so much I actually blushed. I am now 43 years old and I will never forget that woman and still think about it every now and then. Traveling on a train. Empty except for me and this guy. He is looking at a piece of paper that looks like a bill. He looks like he is in shock and defeated. I'm thinking of the $2.50 bills in my pocket. It's my stop. I get off. What if I regret it to this day? I hope he is doing okay. I was a freshman in college and got into a convo with a busker. He came as close to convincing me to quit school and join him. Said I was a square peg. That college was taking away my sharp edges so that I'd fit into the societal machine like a proper round peg. He said he never went hungry and rarely didn't have a roof over his head. And didn't mind occasionally sleeping under the stars. I swear. I almost went with him. And still wonder what would have happened. What my life would be like now. Like 100% that dude has started a cult by now. On our 29th anniversary while on vacation, my hubby, M58, and I, F56, went for a hike and asked a young couple to take our picture. The guy asked me to take theirs too. While I did, he dropped to his knee and pulled out a ring and proposed. We exchanged numbers and I made them promise to update me after the wedding. They did. I think of them often and hope they're happy and still in love. I used to work in a cancer center. After a while I started to work with a very apathetic attitude. Many died and that is simply the way it was. After about a year we saw a patient who only came in for one visit. The physician told the patient and their family that the aggressive cancer was worse than the initial scan and there was not much time left. They cried. I do not remember anything from inside the patient's room. I don't remember what they were wearing. I don't remember their face. Nothing. I didn't care. The patient was simply another person who was unlucky. The physician and I left the room. When the patient left and was passing by in the hallway they put their hand on my shoulder. Looked me in the eyes and smiled and then walked away. They died the next week. Those eyes. Those deep emerald eyes and that soft smile haunt me to this day. The eyes and the smile are all I remember. Engraved in my mind. And they float there like the Cheshire Cat smile. Was coming out of a show in the Lower East Side. Late at night. Drunk. With a friend. We walked to the taco truck across the street from Berlin. And this guy walked up with his dog. I said hello his. The dog. Hairs like spaghetti and without skipping a beat the guy said haha yeah. Al dent. Stay. I'll think about it from time to time. In 1994 my family went to Disney and stayed at Port Orleans. They had or may still have a water slide in the shape of a dragon at the one pool and I remember on the top of the slide someone had pooped and left this sloppy, waterlogged turd. Another kid on the way up with me kept me from stepping in it and we ended up playing in the pool most of the day and then met back up and swam until the pool closed. He was from New York. Liked a lot of the things I liked and he reminded me a ton of a friend of mine from school. It was a ton of fun hanging out with him and getting a small break from my little sister and parents. He either left for home the next day or didn't go to the pool. But I never saw him again. Every time someone mentions Port Orleans, I always think of that kid and how much fun it was hanging out with a kid I barely knew.